This video is going to talk about intrinsic versus sentimental value, which is the value you assign to a product that doesn't have a market value and is destroyed and not repairable. A case which involved a defendant who lost 32 50-foot reels of family movies that was owned by the plaintiff. And these movies had the wedding, honeymoon, vacations, birthdays, and other irreplaceable pictures of family members who are deceased. Pretty much something that seems very sentimental and irreplaceable. The issue before the court was, what is the value of the film lost, which is a step number 2 issue. It did not deal with step number 1, which is, are compensatory damages appropriate here? Because obviously they were, because the defendant probably put these films in the garbage dump. The receipt that the defendant gave the plaintiff stated that the defendant assumed no responsibility beyond the retail cost of the film unless otherwise agreed to in writing. So even though the plaintiff said, oh, these are my life, don't lose them, if we follow the contract, the defendant is only liable for 32 rolls of blank film, which is the retail value. The court had to deal with the question of whether this is fair compensation for those 32 rolls of images that the plaintiff's family had recorded over the years. Is that enough? These 32 rolls of blank film, and according to Amazon, is probably worth about $10. The court determined no, but because the plaintiff's property had no market value and could not be replaced, how do they measure the value of these 32 rolls of images of the plaintiff's family? The court stated that in order to determine the value of these lost films, which it decided is considered destroyed personal property, we have to first look at the market value. If the destroyed property has a market value that's reasonable, then we use that to measure the damage. However, if the property has no market value, which here the market value would essentially be $0 for someone else's film of their family, or $10 for blank film, which is not enough to really make the plaintiff whole again, which is again, the whole general rule and goal of compensatory damages, we look at the cost of replacement or reproduction, which is the second alternative if there's no actual reasonable market value. However, if there's no way to replace or reproduce this, like we have in this case, how do you now reproduce many, many years of family films? Then the measurement of damages for the destroyed property is going to be the value to the owner. But what is the value to the owner? But how do you measure the value to the owner? Market value, we can use other products as a measurement. Cost of replacement, we can get quotes. But how do you now measure something that is personal to the person who lost this destroyed property? The court deals with 2 different definitions, which is intrinsic value and sentimental value. It defined intrinsic value as the value to the owner, what it calls the actual value, and sentimental value as governed by feeling, sensibility, or emotional idealism, which in my opinion are still closely connected, but they're trying to say emotional is sentimental, actual value is more what a reasonable person would allocate as the value of this property. On page 613, paragraph 3, the court held in this third situation where the property is destroyed and there's no market value and the cost of repair is not possible because you can't replace the product, the plaintiff cannot recover this sentimental emotional value that they've placed on the property, which likely inflated its value. But the plaintiff can recover the actual or intrinsic value, which they defined as the value that is not sentimental value, not fanciful, again, inflated. The jury awarded $7,500 for the films. Whether you think that's the right amount or not, that's up to you to decide. But the court gets to determine or measure what is considered actual value and not sentimental, which again is just this reasonable person sort of standard. But where does intrinsic value, sentimental value fit in the bigger picture of remedies? It's not on the chart, right? If it's not on our chart, what do we do? Well, usually I'll explain it to you. Or you realize if it's not on the chart, it might fall in one of these bigger categories. And in this case, intrinsic value, which is replacing the lost property or destroyed property, is considered the actual value of the injury. Similar to when we would award property damage or damage for personal injury, that is what intrinsic value is. It's just a special way to measure it where we have destroyed property with no market value and no cost to repair because it's irreplaceable.